3 years ago, I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, sitting behind the main stage at General Assembly, helping to put together arches that would serve as the doorways for that evening's youth service. It was my first time working as a youth advisor in Unitarian Universalism. This worship, Synergy, was my team's project. I had shepherded two high schoolers as they planned this important worship service. And while I was back there chatting with Amanda from the UUA, I got a text from one of the young adults asking me to come out to the tables to join a conversation about the service. I expected a simple logistics conversation. It was not. There were big feelings happening around something some of the young adults wanted to do during the worship service that others felt was not appropriate at that time. And I won't go into details, but there were a lot of hard feelings and some harsh words. I spent my time at the table listening, reflecting, and giving adultier adult level advice. The conversation ended, and I headed backstage again. The next moment changed my life. Amanda looked at me and said, "Hey, so I hear you're an amazing chaplain. How would you like to come to camp in Wyoming and serve as a chaplain for our middle and high school youth?" I said, "Cool, when?" She said, "Next week." Friends, I had a moment because this was everything I felt called to do in my life. And I knew that the board at the congregation I served was already unhappy with how much I had traveled that year for both school and other events like General Assembly. And I joke that I said yes because it was 10 days in July in Wyoming. I offered to dig latrines to get out of Florida in July. A week and a half later, I was landing in Denver Airport, about to embark on a great adventure. I expected an easy week. Chaplain duties probably meant dealing with homesickness, or maybe some struggles with cabin mates, or maybe some stuff campers might be dealing with at home or school. No, so much no. What I discovered, and what has brought me back every year since, is that our Unitarian Universalist youth are dealing with so many big things. They're dealing with their gender identity and how their families are responding, both supportive and not. They're dealing with figuring out how to survive when the country is outlawing their very existence. They're dealing with deciding if the faith they have been raised in is being reflected in the adult congregation. After 3 years of serving as a chaplain, I felt it was time to share with you all what I have learned from these campers. Not just as campers. These youth and young adults are the heartbeat of our faith, not the future, the now, the present, the way we survive or don't. Now, perhaps like me, your church camp experience was not you. And I will admit, I had a very big learning curve my first year. My camp experience was in the Assemblies of God, so very different. So, what happens at a Unitarian Universalist youth camp? Well, we start our day together in the front of the dining hall, where a meal blessing is shared by either a chaplain or a camper. We eat, and the staff has a meeting, and we transition to what is called Spirit Circle. This is a time for fun songs, energizers, not my favorite part because I'm not fully awake yet, and then announcements. Then we split up into workshops, with some groups doing a service project during this time for the campground. Workshops are always related to our theme for the week. This year, our theme was pluralism. So we had options like pluralism cake, hiking, jam band, sand mandalas, mindful movement, fire building and safety, and improv. All workshops had opening words, an activity, and then closing words. After workshops, we had a justice and inclusion time. Each day had various activities and discussion around our values. And I want to share an interesting tidbit I learned this year. In one of our value voting times, where they had to put themselves on a spectrum between strongly agree and strongly disagree, I discovered that most of our youth felt that TikTok is bad for youth. And they said it's because it's easy to get into an echo chamber, and the amount of alt-right content that is being pushed to the youth's algorithms make it dangerous. And 90% of our youth don't use TikTok. Another powerful moment was when we had the youth write down their identities and the societal pressures they deal with because of it. And we dealt with racial identity, gender identity, and neurodivergence and disability. For many of our youth, when it comes to gender identity, they feel immense pressure to fit into the gender stereotypes, regardless of where they are on the gender spectrum. Justice and inclusion time leads into lunch with another meal blessing, and then it's off to rest ministry. Rest ministry is an hour of quiet time in their cabins, being monitored by leadership team, the 25 and up staff, so that their cabin counselors get an hour off. After rest ministry, it's time for activities. At Quest, the one in Wyoming, that means basketball, gaga ball, friendship bracelet making, always a hit, reverse tie dye, and sometimes a hike. At Camp Blue Boat in Idaho, the main activity is swimming and boating, with crafts available as well. And these are the times I've had the best conversations with campers because we're relaxed and just hanging out. After activities, we go into spiritual practices. Some groups are tagged with planning worship during this time, and the rest of the campers get to do things like writing a prayer or blessing, a guided journaling activity, pluralism tarot, nature meditations, and building nature altars. Now, I got to lead prayer writing at Quest, and let me tell you, these kids. One of our rising sixth graders, Evan, wrote the following and shared it as a meal blessing the next day. We all came here from somewhere. We came from far away. We came from just down the road. We came from Colorado, Utah, Kansas. We came from the cities, the mountains, the towns. Even if we all come from different places around the state, country, even globe, when we all come together to one worship, meal, camp, it is truly magical. Every one of us, let this food bless us all and our time here at camp. Y'all, I cried. So did his big sibling, who sobbed all through dinner because it was so beautiful. After spiritual practices, we have gaggle groups, which are basically a small group ministry. And these are not necessarily their cabin groups. The campers are kind of divided into high school, middle school, but they have a mix. So they're not the ones they spend all their time with in the cabin. Gaggle groups have a chalice lighting, a check-in with questions, an activity, and a closing. And these groups get deep fast. My gaggle group went from Sunday afternoon of not knowing each other to by Tuesday sharing their deepest, darkest thoughts. Each gaggle group is responsible for participating in the service project, either an activity or postcard writing, and planning a worship. My gaggle at Quest had the final worship before Odysseys and Bridging. One of my high schoolers, Maddie, wrote the following to share. When you look up, you can see stars, hundreds of stars, twinkling long into the night. When the clouds come, they cover them up, but that doesn't mean they're gone. You might not see them, but they're there. Millions of stars way up there. Stars come and go, just like friends. We leave this camp, but never forget it. We make friends who will leave when the week is done, but we will never forget them. Every year we come back, meet old friends and make new ones, but every year we come back again, just like the stars and the clouds. Friends are here for you, even when you can't see them. At Camp Blue Boat, my gaggle was responsible for the Tuesday morning worship, and the group decided to do it at the beach because we were on a lake. They planned for everyone to pick up a rock that was unique like them. Then our first-year camper, Fiona, wrote the reflection. She had them look at the rock, recognize its uniqueness, and recognize that everyone has a unique rock. She then invited them to come to the water's edge and throw their rocks into the lake, watching the ripples and how they interact with one another. It was a really powerful worship service, and everyone was talking about the service the rest of the week. Back to our schedule. After gaggle groups is dinner, and you guessed it, another blessing. Then we have some type of evening activity with worship either before or after, depending on the activity. And usually after worship, you'll find the high schoolers hanging out and spontaneously leading songs around the campfire because they get an extra half hour while we let the middle schoolers go first to bed. Then the most glorious time is bedtime. So very different than what you may have experienced as a youth, and definitely different than what I have experienced. And I tell you all to say this. Our Unitarian Universalist youth know our faith. They know what it means to be a pluralistic faith, especially after this week at camp. They know how to support one another. They understand how to craft a worship service that is meaningful and engaging. They understand our values and believe strongly in them. They know what injustice looks like, and it makes them really angry. And after talking with some of our young adult counselors, they know what's lacking in their congregations, but they feel powerless to change it. In the 3 years I've served at Quest, I've watched a handful of youth transition to being adults, and I've been there for their bridging at camp. And I had my heart broken this year. when these young adults went from checking in with their congregation name during staff training to simply responding, "Camp is my congregation." I want you to hear that. These are not youth who were just sometimes going to church. These are youth who were really engaged with their youth groups and congregations as teenagers. Once they bridge, once they move from high school to adulthood, once they no longer have the youth spaces to go into, they no longer feel that the congregation is theirs. And I'm not talking about one or two either. It was 90% of our young adult staff said either camp or I don't really have a congregation anymore when asked to name their home congregation. We know our youth leave after they bridge. We've known for 20 years, as the Commission on Appraisal has repeatedly reported. We've been comfortable saying, well, when they get married and have kids, they come back to raise their kids here, so it's okay. Friends, they're not coming back. This generation that is moving into young adulthood, Generation Z, is not planning on having kids anytime soon, if at all. But they're yearning for community, and they're not finding it with us. Now, many of you know this has been my soapbox and has been for a while. It's what informed my doctor of ministry. I have shouted this from the rooftops. We should not be okay with our youth leaving as part of their journey into adulthood. During Camp Blue Boat, I sat and wrote postcards to voters with another staffer and a high schooler, Fiona from my gaggle group. Somehow they got me on my soapbox and I began talking about it. And then Fiona shared how things are in her congregation and how she really only attends youth group because the main congregation isn't feeding her in any meaningful way. She shared how some youth members wanted to join the board and the bylaws allowed for it, but they hit so many roadblocks by members who didn't think they should have a voice there. And I realized that may not have been the member's intention, but the impact felt by this high schooler was that her voice was not important. After we cleaned up and got ready to go to our next thing, Fiona pulled me aside and said, I appreciate what you shared with me. It made me realize that if I want things to change, I need to be there, even if they aren't sure they want me. I'm going to start going to main service more and make sure they know I'm there. Thank you. That was the fourth time I cried that week. She also gave me this really awesome friendship bracelet, which is the first one I've ever gotten from a camper. But so what are the lessons that I have from camp for you? I have 10 because I like lists. First, one, our youth are dealing with so much. The state of the world, their own identities, acceptance or lack of, even at home and in their church communities, school shootings, legislation that wants to erase them or their friends, and the knowledge that the world they are about to enter as adults is falling apart around them. Two, they know what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist in very deep ways. They know and deeply believe in our values of justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. They know what it means to honor the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And in many cases, they're not seeing this in their congregations. 3, they want to be here. They want to be in communities where they can be themselves and be accepted and honored for that. They want to contribute. They want to be in and create safe and supportive and brave spaces to work out this faith and live into it. They want to invite their friends to our congregations, but they don't because they're not sure if it's safe enough for them. 4, they worship deeply, not to a deity or a concept, but they consider community to be the thing of worth that needs to be lifted up. After 3 years of youth worship nightly at camp, I get it now. Their worships are deeply spiritual. They contemplate, they wish, they dream, they hold one another in love, they sing. My goodness, do they love to sing. We often have to kick out the high schoolers when it's time for them to go to their cabins. They would stay around the fire all night if they could, sitting in silence between songs, and then someone begins singing something and we all join in. Not hymns, newer songs and chants. They're able to harmonize and do them in rounds. Their worship activities are thoughtful and deep. Meditations, conversations, reflections, readings. There is time for silence, time for singing. It's interactive and engaging. Is it any wonder that when they reach the big church that they find it lacking? 5, they want so much more for us. These youth and young adults believe with every fiber of their being that we as a faith movement can change the world. They're ready to go. They don't want to sit in endless committees discussing how to do it. They are brave change makers and are ready to be deployed into the world. They'll do it without us if they have to, but it breaks their hearts. 6, they will be lovers of leaving. We teach our kids well. We share with them about all the other faiths out there. We teach them about building communities. And when we don't live up to our aspirations, they will leave to protect their hearts. 7, they will build their own communities. One of our counselors at Quest has said that he'd love to arrange for a young adult camp where they come up for a weekend or a week to the campground we use and help the camp manager do work. They do the work for free in exchange for accommodations. This is the same young adult who told me that camp is his congregation because it's where he really gets to worship. Our young adults are organizing on their own. That may or may not be within our institutions. 8, they may not come back. Congregations who still call the young adults millennials are completely out of touch. That generation is in their 30s and 40s now, and they are the last of our youth to return. Generation Z is our young adult generation. And due to the state of the world, they are choosing to delay or simply not have children. So, what will bring them back? And why are we okay with them leaving to begin with? 9, they are capable leaders, more than capable. One of the things I've learned about UU youth spaces is that they are youth led. Sure, there are adults to supervise and guide them, but everything at camp, and from what I hear, it's the same in youth group, is led by the youth for the youth. Even in our various content teams for camp, the youth and young adults make the decisions. Other than the opening worship, which is designed by the Spirit team, which has young adults on it, all worship at camp is planned by the youth. 10, we need them more than they need us. Unitarian Universalism, much like many other denominations, has an aging problem. As our adults get older, if our youth are not there to step into those roles, who will? I constantly hear from congregations that there aren't enough volunteers to fill all the roles. Our youth are here to tell us that there are other ways of doing the things we're doing that, spoiler alert, do not require endless committee meetings that happen in the middle of the day. Will we listen? I hope so. Friends, I wish each of you could have a UU youth camp experience, because if all adult UUs, especially those who came out of another tradition or came in with no church experience, could have this deeply connected and deeply spiritual experience, I believe it would change us. And by changing us, we could change the world. Let us not ignore the wisdom coming out of both Generation Z, our young adults, and Generation Alpha, our current youth, when it comes to our faith. Because if we do, it will be at our peril. May we be open to hearing from the heartbeat of our faith. May we be open to being truly welcoming as they transition from youth to young adulthood. And may we all be blessed by those connections.